Live from London, this is Global Business.
Hello and welcome to the programme. I'm Sally Burdett.
And I'm Li Jianhua. Our top stories. The International Monetary Fund lifts its forecast for China's economy to 5%, but warns of risk ahead.
Mining giant BHP's pursuit of rival Anglo American appears to have stalled as a key deadline passes.
China's President Xi Jinping hosts talks with his Egyptian counterparts in Beijing on the eve of the China-Arab States Cooperation Forum.
South Africa is at the polls with the ruling ANC's 30-year grip on power hanging in the balance.
And for the fifth time since December, a volcano on Iceland's Reykjanes Peninsula is erupting.
The International Monetary Fund says China's economic growth is expected to remain resilient at 5% this year, an upgrade from its previous forecast.
The IMF says its better outlook was driven by China's strong first-quarter data and recent policy measures. However, it also points out that structural reforms are needed in order to counter China's economic headwinds.
Key priorities include rebalancing the economy towards consumption by strengthening the social safety net and liberalizing the services sector to enable it to boost growth and create jobs. China plays an important and constructive role in supporting debt restructuring in low-income countries and promoting the green transition. The fund looks forward to our continued cooperation with the authorities in this regard.
Vera Wing Han Yon is lecturer in economics at the University of Hong Kong.
The upward revision of Chinese growth forecast from 4.6% to 5% partly reflects the stronger than expected growth in the first quarter this year by 5.3% relative to 1 year ago. It also reflects recent moves by the Chinese government and regulators to stimulate the economy. Some policy measures, including lowering the interest rate, requiring a smaller down payment for home loans, as well as recent announcement regarding lending support for affordable housing. So all these add together, it revised up the growth forecast.
And also the International Monetary Fund has warned that China needs to scale back its industrial policies. Can you further elaborate on that?
In fact, the IMF has not made clear what the industrial policies they refer to. But I believe it is related to the government spending large sum of money subsidizing homegrown companies while also seeking to block competing products from the rest of the world. So they may be referring to solar panel or electric vehicles, which is a controversial topic. For one, subsidizing on certain industry can sometimes improve welfare. For example, subsidizing green energy may be a good idea. And also other countries are also subsidizing their own industries sometimes. So it's not only China. And the claim of saying that China has overcapacity, it's not that straightforward because we don't know how to measure exactly what is overcapacity.
What do you think are the comprehensive and balanced policy approach that the IMF is suggesting?
Well, I think China is approaching that comprehensive policy approach. So the first thing is about the property market, which has been a problem for quite some time. And the government has wide-ranging measures to stimulate the economy. And one thing, of course, is to deal with the property sector. So they come up with a solution. They ask the local governments across the county to buy unsold homes from the developers in financial troubles and easing rules on housing purchase. So hopefully it could moderate the housing market and stabilize it. And then People's Bank of China will also provide 300 billion yuan in loans to fund the purchase of unsold homes. The other stimulus would be to restore consumer confidence. And then all this will come together in a chain because when people have more confidence in the housing market, they feel that, there's a way out for their wealth, they would be more willing to invest. And I think more importantly, it's the government send a message that they have recognized this as a problem, and they will provide a solution. So this would restore confidence for both investors and consumers to restore the upward cycle.
The owners of the UK's Royal Mail have agreed to a multi-billion-pound takeover bid by the Czech billionaire Daniel Kretinsky. Directors have approved the offer that values the business along with its international post service, GLS, at $6.6 billion. Under the terms, the new owners have a pledge to keep its headquarters in the UK for an initial period of 5 years.
An intellectual property court in Shanghai has ruled in favor of Apple's China unit. The case was brought 3 years ago by a Chinese consumer that charged the iPhone maker with market monopoly. The US tech giant was accused of unfairly charging 30% commission on purchases in the China App Store. The ruling, which is likely to be appealed, is a relief for Apple. Legal experts expected the case to open the door for more Chinese consumers filing similar suits.
The Samsung Electronics Union has called its first ever strike at the South Korean technology giant in a disagreement over wages. The union, which has around 28,000 members, said it will no longer tolerate what it calls the persecution of organized labor. There are fears the walkout could jeopardize the global supply of semiconductors. Samsung is one of the world's biggest manufacturers of chips.
Australia's privacy watchdog has closed its preliminary inquiry into TikTok. The Office of the Australian Information Commissioner says there's no clear and obvious breach of Australian privacy law. TikTok and owners ByteDance filed a lawsuit this month against the US after Congress put forward advanced legislation to have the social media sharing platform banned or sold.
China's biggest ride-hailing company, Didi Global, fell to its first quarter net loss after 2 consecutive quarters of profit. The firm reported a net loss of more than $180 million in the first 3 months of the year. Didi attributed the drop to rising marketing costs as well as losses on its stake in EV maker XPeng.
BHP's planned takeover of mining rival Anglo American appears to have hit another bump in the road. Or is it perhaps the end of the road for this $49 billion deal? John Terrett joins us from New York. Hello, John. This is such a massive deal. Almost leaves me breathless, but is it actually over?
Well, it is for now. How about that? Probably not, possibly not forever, but it certainly is for now. And the thing is, it's funny because these are 2 giant companies. Now, they're just enormous. Wherever in the world there is digging and mining for metal products, they're there. And of course, we're talking about Anglo American, which is so named because when they formed it, they used American money from New York and London money from the UK, and BHP, which is based in Melbourne, big Australian company. So you have London versus Melbourne, Australia going on here. And you're right, it is a $49 billion deal. And what's happened is there was a deadline for this deal to go through, and it ran out about 9 minutes ago. So it's off for the time being. Now, what happened was last week, Anglo rejected the 3rd bid from BHP. And I remember reporting this on our program last week. But at the time, Anglo said, well, OK, we'll have another week's talks. OK, and that's the thing that's just run out now. So Anglo said no to the 3rd bid last week, and now the extension of 1 week has ended. Now, the issue is really that BHP is not interested in the vast majority of the Anglo-American business. It only wants the copper business, okay? And the reason for that is that copper is the new gold. Copper is trading at all-time highs because copper has great heat conductivity. It's a terrific heat conductor, and so therefore it's needed in solar panels, you know, in solar equipment. It's needed in batteries, of course. It's needed in all sorts of high tech. So copper is really the most desired thing in Anglo-American's portfolio as far as BHP is concerned. But the thing is, Anglo-American does much more than just copper. It does platinum, for example. It's 40% of the world's platinum. It does all sorts of other metals. It does diamonds because it owns De Beers in South Africa, and it even has a fertilizer plant in North England. Now, BHP said, what we want you to do, we'll take you over, but you sell off all those bits except for the copper. And Anglo-American said, Are you joking? What's the matter with you? No. No, we're not doing that. You can buy us as a whole, and then you sell off the bits you don't want, but we ain't doing it. And that really is the sticking point, and that's why it's all gone pear-shaped, unfortunately. Now, the Anglo shares are down by about 5% at the moment. BHP's down by... Oh, it's just gone up now. It's up 1/5 of 1%. It was down earlier. And the big question, the unanswered question, is what happens now? Will somebody else come in? Or will they wait 6 months to try again? We don't know.
So no deal for now. But where we are seeing a lot of deals, John, is in oil.
I know. It's unbelievable. I mean, the people at the banks are working overtime at the moment to bring these big oil people together in the oil patch. They call it the oil patch down in Texas because in Texas, like in the Middle East, you can put your hand in the sand and pull this stuff out with your own hand in certain places. There's so much of it down there. So 2 stories today from the oil patch. One is ConocoPhillips, and they own a huge refinery just over the Hudson River in New Jersey. But Conoco is buying Marathon Oil. They're both based in Houston, Texas. Marathon shares are up 9% at this moment. They're the best performer in the S&P 500, and it is an all-stock deal. But the other one which caught our eye is Chevron, one of the biggest oil majors here, the other one being Exxon. Chevron is going to take over Hess Corporation, or at least it wants to. Hess Corporation is based here on the Avenue of the Americas in New York. Chevron is in California, and they want to take Hess over, and the Hess shareholders have said, yes, we want this deal to go ahead. It's a $53 billion deal, and we'd like it to go ahead. However, Exxon is not at all happy about Chevron taking over Hess, because Exxon says, well, hang on a minute, we've got a whole deal in Guyana in South America with Hess, and therefore, because of that, we have first dibs on this company, not you, Chevron. And they're arguing it out in court. So if Exxon wins that, then the deal between Chevron and Hess will be off. Why are they getting excited about the oil patch? Well, the answer is simple. All these companies are looking for new, long-term drilling areas in the world where they can extract black gold for many years to come. One of them will be the Bakken Shale field, for example, though that is maturing now, to be honest with you, but they're looking for others as well, and that's why these deals are going ahead. Chevron shares down 1.2%, Hess down 1.2% as well. And the final thing to say is the regulators do care very much about this industry. They will look at all of these, but in particular the Chevron Hess thing, very, very closely indeed. And finally, can I say, the jury in the Trump trial got their case about 40 minutes ago. So that's your next big story out of North America.
Yeah, certainly one to watch. Thank you so much for that update from New York. John Terrett.
Now let's stay in America. U.S. trading is speeding up settlement of securities transactions. Investors will now have to finish their transactions in 1 business day, known as T1, instead of 2 business days. Joining us to talk about the change is Citi Index analyst Fiona Cincotta. Fiona, great to have you on the show. So we used to have T2, or T3 even. Now is T1. Why are the U.S. equity markets moving to an even shorter settlement cycle?
Yes, that's right. So actually, this is a settlement cycle that there was in process around 100 years ago. So back to it, basically what this means is that the trade is finalised so that the funds and the securities are delivered the following day. And that's down from 2 days. Now, the reason that you might this would be happening and is a good idea, because if we think of it like this, the settlement period, so that time is a time in which one or both of the parties to that trade could actually fail, in which case that brings risk to the trade. So if you manage to shorten that time, then the idea being that there should be less risk involved, less counterparty risk, less operational risk, less systemic risk. And the idea is that it would be a more efficient way of trading and a more transparent way of trading.
Well, Fiona, this is the first day for T2, and today is first day for T1, sorry about that. And today is a double settlement day. Is this affecting the market?
So, yeah, so this is a double settlement day. It does mean that they're settling the trades from Friday as well as those from Tuesday. It's not affecting the market necessarily in the sense that we're not seeing increased volatility in share prices, but what we will see is a much larger volume of trades being settled. Now, I think this is a process that has happened before. So we have seen, obviously, it go from T3 to T2 and then from T2 to T1. That's what we'll be looking for. So we have heard that things are expected to go well. This is something that's being well planned for. So up to now, so good so far. But I think going forward, we might see a few little hiccups with a potential for more failed trades, I think, in the short term.
So I'm wondering, how is this affecting investors outside the US, and what operational challenges does this pose for, let's say, European investors?
Yes, so I mean, if you think about Europe, you've got the disadvantage already of the time zone difference. Yeah. So if you're thinking about sort of, the UK, Germany, you've got, anywhere between 4 to 6 hours already that you're having to deal with. So settlement tasks, which previously they had sort of, 14 to 24 hours to deal with, now need to be done in 3. It's going to mean there's the potential for a change of hours needed in the UK, for example, or Europe's working day. But then on top of that, you've also got the FX transactional complication, which is settled T+2. So actually, these investors from the Eurozone, from Europe into the US, are going to need to source dollars much faster in order to get these trades to be settled.
Thank you very much. That is City Index analyst Fiona Cincotta. Thank you so much for your insight.
You're watching CGTN. Still to come, the Spanish Prime Minister says his country shares the will and commitment of Arab countries in ending the conflict in Gaza.
Ever wondered what's the difference between a bear and a bull market? Where are the cash cows? And who are the lame ducks? And what exactly are black swans, grey rhinos, and unicorn companies? Make sense of it all with Global Business, only on CGTN.
I think it should be more global cooperation.
I would like to hear more the voice of the developing countries.
Globalization has lifted more than 1 billion people out of poverty.
The great transition has to happen. It's a necessity.
Well, China and the United States are important powers in the world.
What unites us is much more than what divides us. And I believe China is committed to this agenda.
Join me, Juliet Mann, to set the agenda at these times every weekend on CGTN.
Hello and welcome back. Israel's offensive on Rafah has intensified, with the tanks raiding the central and western parts of the city.
This is despite mounting international condemnation of Israel and an order from the International Court of Justice to halt the attacks. The United States, Israel's closest ally, opposes a major Israeli ground offensive in Rafah, but says there's no evidence an operation on that scale is currently underway.
Aid agencies have been calling for peace talks in order to get desperately needed humanitarian aid into the enclave. The world's largest humanitarian network says a ceasefire is urgently needed to get life-saving aid flowing into Gaza.
Our correspondent Akram Al-Satari is in central Gaza.
The picture is extremely grim in Rafah. People are still falling because of the ongoing bombardment targeting different areas in Rafah. It's not only East Rafah or Central Rafah or West Rafah or South or North Rafah. The bombardment is through. The number of people who are killed is increasing. Around 19 people are killed so far since the morning. The latest attack claimed the life of 4 children. 4 children from Rafah were targeted and were killed. According to the news that we're receiving from the ground, the bombardment and the targeting is hitting houses infrastructure and people. One friend of mine was communicating with his family. He frantically phoned me. He was trying to get in touch with the International Committee of the Red Cross. He was telling me that whole family was under the rubble and the entire family was killed except for one of his nieces who was communicating with him from under the rubble. The homes are being targeted. The number of people is increasing. In the last 36 hours, around 75, in the last 24 hours, 75 people were killed. And in Rafah, 64 people were killed in the last 36 hours in 4 deadly attacks that targeted areas that were perceived by the Palestinian population as safe area. So the situation continues to be extremely tense as the Israeli troops continue to advance into the city from the very southern part of the Rafah city and from the very eastern side into the western side, and the troops that are in the very southern side are also maneuvering, planning also to enter the Rafah area, Shabura area, from the other area, the very south part of Rafah, and to advance deep into Rafah center. They have been advancing. They have been targeting, they have been using the quadcopters to drop bombs on the Palestinian citizens in the streets of Rafah. They have been using the artillery fire, and they have also been using the F-16 to drop the very big bombs. And we could hear the bombardments even from Gaza Central area, even from this very specific place, around 27 to 30 kilometers away from Rafah. We could hear the bombardment. We could see the war jets also hovering around the sky and going towards Rafah. So the misery is continuous, bombardment is continuous, people continue to fall dead and injured because of that ongoing ground operation in Rafah that seems to be a large-scale operation, not a very limited operation that has an aim of just targeting one specific area in Rafah.
That was our correspondent Akram Al-Satri in Central Gaza, and now from Israel we're joined by our correspondent Jonathan Regev in Tel Aviv. Jonathan, great to see you. So Israel has said that the fighting or the military operation in Gaza is likely to continue for at least another 7 months.
That is correct. The head of the Israeli National Security Council was quoted saying that the high-intensity fighting in Gaza will continue at least for another 7 months. That would bring this war to over a year. And we're speaking of a high-intensity war. Of course, the war in Gaza also has its implications on the northern border. So we're looking, at least according to what Israel is saying, for a prolonged campaign. How will Israel deal with international pressure? It is yet to be seen. And if we speak of international pressure, apart from these 3 European countries which have already announced they will they recognize a Palestinian state, today we've been hearing reports that have not been confirmed yet, but these reports are saying that Brazil is withdrawing its ambassador from Israel back to Brazil for consultations. There's no official confirmation yet, but it would not be a major surprise, as Brazilian President Lula da Silva has been one of Israel's biggest critics since the war in Gaza began. So we're hearing condemnation from practically all across the world towards Israel. It began way before the operation in Rafah, but Israel is still insisting that this operation will continue and that this campaign as a whole will continue for months and months to come.
Jonathan, Israel is facing a lot of international criticism. Just how much political pressure is Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu under from both within his own war cabinet and the opposition?
There is a strong pressure from both these bodies that you mentioned, but we have to understand that they're simply not strong enough. There was a meeting today of heads of 3 opposition parties, Yair Lapid, Avigdor Lieberman, Gideon Saar, and this meeting was meant to coordinate the steps to bring down the current government. But we have to remember, the opposition only has 56 seats in parliament. In order to bring down the government, you'd need 61 fingers. So they're 5 short, and unless they have 5 other members of the coalition join them, then the opposition is simply not strong enough. At least until now, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has had a very strong grip on a 64-member coalition, and that does not seem to change. If we're speaking of the war cabinet, in that body, then there are also members from opposition parties such as Gadi Eisenkot, such as his party leader Benny Gantz, includes both former chiefs of staff, and they had quite strong criticism through the past few days on the policy led by Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. But even with that criticism, the coalition, as we mentioned, is still strong. 64-member coalition, which Benjamin Netanyahu has a very strong grip on. And as long as he does that, at least when it comes to the Israeli parliament, the condition of Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is quite stable.
Thank you very much, Jonathan. That is our correspondent, Jonathan Regev, in Tel Aviv.
Meanwhile, the UN Security Council is meeting to discuss the situation in Gaza. An Algerian resolution calling for an immediate ceasefire, a halt on the Rafah offensive and the return of all hostages to Israel is expected to be put forward. Our correspondent Jody Jacobs is at the UN in New York and joins us now. Hello, Jody. So has anything happened yet at this meeting that you can tell us about?
Well, indeed, there's been a lot of conversation and talk at this particular meeting with regards to that resolution, Sally, but no definitive time or date has been placed on the table as to when this resolution is, in fact, going to be voted on. But all indications are, in fact, that the U.S. will most likely either abstain from the vote or veto it, in fact. Already the UN Deputy Representative told reporters here this morning that another resolution is not going to change the situation on the ground, Sally, and that the US wants to, in some way or another, continue to support an agreement on the release of hostages and increase the aid into Gaza. Now, we know from previous negotiations around these resolutions, they take time. But the permanent representative of Algeria says that time is not on their side and that the council must in fact make a decision immediately. The council dynamics currently is now on full display again as these members of the UN Security Council now negotiate around the wording of it. But as I said, that we suspect that the UN might in fact veto it. I must also add that in one of the most powerful opening statements today, it was made in that Security Council by the permanent representative of Guyana, Caroline Rodriguez Burkett. And she says, another meeting, another list of statements, all calling for an end to the war. And she continues and she says, when will it all end? Who and what will make it end? Sally.
Such a powerful statement. Jody, I wonder if you can, we're seeing these blockages when it gets to the crunch, but I would imagine that diplomats and officials at the UN have a lot to say. Have you been party to any of that?
Indeed, and there's been a lot of conversation in the corridors with reporters before going into these meetings, as well as in the very meeting itself. They are meeting at the moment in the Security Council to discuss the situation in Gaza in particular. And these diplomatic wranglings over Gaza is now already underway. There was a Security Council meeting yesterday, on Tuesday, which, of course, discussed what had taken place over the weekend. And we know that there is this new resolution that, as you said, calls for the immediate halt to the fighting in Rafah. And in addressing that council just a few minutes ago, Sally, Algeria's permanent representative, who has now put this resolution to the table, he says, and I quote, "Wanting images from Gaza floats our screen all over the world. If we don't speak, steer the spirit of humanity in all of us, then the words that we are using in this council are useless." He says that Algeria has a responsibility as an Arab state in the council, and with the support of the Arab group, decided to, of course, submit this resolution, urging everyone in the council to shoulder what it calls its responsibility, with the hope that they can, of course, support this draft resolution. He says that he hopes that they can, for once, be a unified Security Council, and that they can actually make one a resolution pass and be implemented, and 2, enforce the ICJ ruling of last week. The Chinese representative, Sally, telling the Council that they hope that members will put aside their political calculations to prioritize the lives and support its adoption as soon as possible. Sally.
All right, thank you so much for that update. Jody Jacobs at the United Nations in New York.
Spanish Prime Minister Pedro Sanchez says his country shares with Arab countries the will and commitment to end the conflict in Gaza. He has also endorsed the two-state solution for Israel and Palestine.
Sanchez has met Palestinian Prime Minister Mohammed Mustafa and officials from several Middle Eastern countries in Madrid. The meeting comes a day after Spain, Ireland and Norway recognized a Palestinian state. Our correspondent Ken Brown is in Madrid.
The day after Spain, Ireland and Norway officially recognized a Palestinian state, Spanish Prime Minister Pedro Sanchez met with his Palestinian counterpart Mohammed Mustafa and leading officials from a number of Middle Eastern countries here in Madrid. Qatari Prime Minister Sheikh Mohammed bin Abdul Rahman Al Thani, Saudi Arabian Foreign Minister Prince Faisal bin Farhan were here, along with the foreign ministers for Turkey and Jordan, all members of the group called the Foreign Ministerial Committee of Arabic and Islamic Countries for Gaza. We heard congratulations and celebrations of Spain's recognition for Palestine as a state from that group. Sanchez said he is going to work closer with Middle East partners to try and achieve a two-state solution. Now here's a little of what Palestinian PM Mohammed Mustafa had to say in Madrid today.
This recognition strengthens our resolve to continue our struggle for a just and lasting peace. Rafah is testing the world. Does not fail Rafah. Does not fail Rafah. Does not fail Palestine.
Spain Foreign Minister José Manuel Álvarez repeated Spain's demand for an immediate ceasefire in Gaza and also added this.
I want to reiterate our commitment to following this path to peace, and I hope that other European countries will soon follow, just as Slovenia will do tomorrow.
Now here at the Casa Árabe, or the Arabic Center in central Madrid, you can see has been draped with Palestinian flags behind me, celebrating, welcoming that the announcement yesterday, the declaration. It's also been celebrated by government supporters, Palestine supporters, students who continue to camp around the campuses of Spain for Palestine. But on the right of Spain's political divide, there has been much criticism of the move. Opposition leader Alberto Núñez Feijóo has accused Sanchez of helping Hamas, and far-right leader party of the Vox party, Santiago Abascal, even traveled to Israel to meet in person with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu to convey the idea that not everyone here in Spain was on board with Sanchez's move to recognize Palestinian sovereignty. Meanwhile, Sanchez is trying to revive the idea of an international peace conference that has already been rejected outright by Israel.
Ken Brown in Madrid there. Now, you can get highlights from the week's news in Europe and China direct to your inbox from CGTN's Storyboard email newsletter. Sign up at europe.cgtn.com/newsletter.
You're watching CGTN Still Ahead. South Africa has been voting in the closest fought election since the end of apartheid, with the ruling ANC's 30-year grip on power hanging in the balance. We'll be live in Johannesburg.
Welcome back to Global Business Europe with me, Sally Baudet, and Li Jinhua. The headlines once more. The International Monetary Fund lifts its forecast for China's economy to 5%, but warns of risks ahead.
Mining giant BHP's pursuit of rival Anglo American appears to have stalled as a key deadline passes.
China's President Xi Jinping has held talks with Egypt's President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi.
Sisi, along with the leaders of the UAE, Bahrain and Tunisia, are in Beijing for the China-Arab States Cooperation Forum, which kicks off on Thursday. Our correspondent Wang Mengjie reports.
During the meeting, President Xi highlighted China's willingness to deepen mutual trust and promote cooperation with Egypt. President Xi hailed bilateral ties as a vivid example of China's solidarity and coordination with Arab, African, Islamic and developing world. He also pledged to expand exchanges with Egypt in traditional fields as infrastructure and agriculture, and open up cooperation in emerging areas such as renewable energy, adding that China encouraged investment in Egypt. Noting that this year marks the 20th anniversary for the establishment of the China-Arab States Cooperation Forum, President Xi called for more collaboration to push China-Arab States relations to a new level. Facing the uncertainties today, President al-Sisi said his country stands ready to work with China to deepen comprehensive strategic partnership. He reiterated Egypt's commitment to the One China principle, saying it firmly supports China's efforts in pursuing national reunification.
China and the Arab League have called for a ceasefire in Gaza and a two-state solution for Israel and Palestine.
Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi and the Secretary General of the Arab League, Ahmed Abul-Gheit, have been meeting in Beijing for Thursday's China-Arab Forum. China says it's willing to keep working with the Arab League to push for an early settlement to the Palestinian issue.
Now, voting is underway in South Africa, with the ruling African National Congress facing its biggest electoral challenge since it came to power 30 years ago.
Opinion polls show support for the ANC is falling amid concerns over crime, unemployment and the lack of basic services in a nation of 60 million people. The ANC has governed South Africa since apartheid ended in 1994. Our correspondent Sumitra Naidu is in Johannesburg. Sumitra, great to see you there. So less than 3 hours to go before the polls close now. How is it going?
Yeah, it's been a busy day. Voting stations opened at 7 a.m. and just over 2 hours left for voting. I'm currently in Soweto in Johannesburg. It's the largest township in the country. I'm at a school just around the corner from the famous Vilakazi Street where former President Nelson Mandela and Archbishop Desmond Tutu are from. Voting got underway, as I said, 7 a.m. in the morning. People went out in their numbers. There were long snaking queues at most stations in Johannesburg. There's over 2.3 million people registered in the city, in the Johannesburg city alone. Here in Soweto, the lines have just picked up, as you can see behind me. Voters still trying to cast their votes before that 9 p.m. close-off. There's not much electricity in this area, so it's quite dark out here. But obviously, people very eager to cast their votes. Lee?
But according to opinion polls, that the ANC is likely to lose its outright majority. So who could potentially be part of a coalition government if it happens?
That's right. Early polls are showing that the ruling party could very well lose that majority that it's held for so long. South Africans are looking for change. Many of the voters I spoke to say they want change for a number of reasons. You know, the power crisis that has gripped this country for over 15 years, it's weighed on the economy. GDP has been hovering around the 1% mark in the last few years and is projected to average only around 1.6% in the next 2 years. That's not even nearly enough to make a dent in unemployment. Another big issue, especially for the youth in this country. Youth unemployment over 60%, while unemployment, official unemployment, sitting at close to 33%. Poverty has also risen in the last 30 years. The tax base has also contracted. And of course, this is a great issue for many South Africans. So, you know, when you look at what the polls are saying, many people not looking to vote for the ANC, they really want change. And there's also a host of new parties that are contesting this election for the first time. Of course, that will dilute the ANC and, of course, the official opposition, the Democratic Alliance in this country. If the ANC loses that 50%, it needs 50% plus one seat in the National Assembly. If it does lose that, then it will lead to a coalition government. The concern now is who the ANC will join in that coalition government, because obviously the different parties differ on policies. How will that then impact the way South Africa is led going forward? Some analysts very concerned about the maturity, the political maturity of these new parties that have come in and contested these elections. So it really is going to depend on who the ANC decides to join in this. Definitely a pivotal moment for South Africa as we go forward. Of course, counting will start only once all of the voting stations close at 9 p.m. this evening. We should get results later, in the next few days, by the weekend, probably the 2nd of June. Lee?
Thank you very much for the update. That is our correspondent Sumitra Naidu in Johannesburg.
All right, let's now bring in Patrick Bond. He's a political economist at the University of Johannesburg. Hello, Patrick. The reality is, no matter who wins, they've got a massive task on their hands. South Africa is the most unequal society in the world. We have very, very poor people. We have poverty, high unemployment. Is there any one party or configuration of a party in a coalition that has the best chance of righting that imbalance?
Well, thanks for having me, Sally. I mean, the main point about Sumitra Naidu's observations is that if below 50%, probably between 40 and 50, the ANC will have to co-govern. And the really crucial dilemma we'll only learn on June 2nd is, will that be around 45 to 50 or that's sort of the terrain that the scenarios suggest. And if it's 45 to 50, it may well be that a more conservative alliance partner, which would accept President Ramaphosa and his economic policies, would prevail. But if it's below 45, it may be that the ANC, and they could even dispense with President Ramaphosa, bring in his deputy, Paul Mashatile, because they'll need to have one of the two new parties, well, Economic Freedom Fighters from 2013, and now the new MK party of former President Zuma, brand new party. And those two are anticipated to get between sort of 7 and 12%. Now, those are the sort of, let's say, parameters in which we can say, well, which policies will be adopted. It might be center-right or it might be center-left, depending on whether it's closer to 40 or closer to 50.
And what do you think would be best for the people of South Africa? Because at the end of the day, South Africans want change in the sense that they want better opportunities to work, better opportunities to make a living and to improve their lives.
I know, and I think some of those opportunities would come from a full rehab of our very broken infrastructure. Here we are in Johannesburg in one of the university suburbs, no water at night, Melville. And so this is one of the moments where we sort of say, well, could you put a lot of people to work fixing the pipes and connecting the solar power and connecting roads and better rail systems through bottom-up infrastructure? If that's your perspective, you probably would want the lower ANC, so they unite with the Economic Freedom Fighters who have that sort of perspective. However, if you like the status quo and you think it's free markets and particularly to attract foreign direct investment, then it would probably be this center-right party, the Inkatha Freedom Party or African Christian Democratic Party. Now, the dilemma is that they've been basically using the center-right agenda, liberalizing, trying to invite in foreign direct investment, and it hasn't worked. And one of the reasons is that huge growth sector of renewables, of solar and wind and the pumped storage for energy, that hasn't really been given a chance except for some private sector and the middle class, those of us who sort of want to protect ourselves from the electricity cuts, so we're putting it in. And that's the real dilemma, is to cross-subsidize if you're on the left, to make sure that everybody can get some sort of solar or, let's say, a renewable energy system and better roads. The potholes here are terrible. clear water, sanitation. And I think it would probably have to be the economic freedom fighters as a partner to push that agenda. As we saw just before this election, the ANC has moved to the left with national health insurance, with a basic income grant. These are promises. They may take decades, but I think it's that sort of pressure from the left that will move the society to mop up that unemployment and solve social problems.
All right, thank you very much for chatting to us. That's Patrick Bond. He's a political economist at the University of Johannesburg.
Former Dutch intelligence chief Dick Schoof is to become the next Prime Minister of the Netherlands, who was nominated by the four parties that make up the coalition government. The decision comes 6 months after Geert Wilders' nationalist party PVV won the Dutch vote. And after that, Wilders ruled himself out as contender for the top job. Incoming leader Schoof says he will be a Prime Minister for all Dutch people.
South Korea has warned residents to watch out for balloons filled with rubbish and excrement. At least 260 balloons from the DPRK have been found in 8 provinces in South Korea, and they're now being analysed. Pyongyang says the move is to retaliate against South Korean activists who they claim sent similar balloons to them in the north.
China has sent a commercial rocket into space from the sea. The launch from waters surrounding the country's eastern province of Shandong has placed a group of 4 satellites into planned orbit. Chinese space experts say the successful takeoff shows the rocket's enhanced adaptability to meet requirements for commercial missions.
So it's crunch time for Europe's politicians. Voters in the EU will cast their ballots next week, choosing their representatives in the European Parliament. There are 705 representatives at the moment. That figure will climb to 720 after this election.
And we have been looking at the strategies of some of the big names in each of the party groups. Today, we shift focus to Terry Ranke, co-president of the Greens EFA.
The German describes herself as a feminist and campaigns for policies that protect the environment. She's also voiced strong opposition to far-right groups, warning they will compromise Europe's safety. Correspondent Michael Marilia has more on Ranke's social media game plan ahead of the election.
Terry Ranke is a 37-year-old German who's been a member of the European Parliament for 10 years. She has a relatively small following on social media, just under 90,000 on X, for example. But make no mistake, she knows what she's doing. Take a look at this tweet. Ranke is saying that the European Union has brought peace and freedom to Europe. She said again and again that far-right groups present a threat, but she's been clever in the way she frames it. She explains what's at stake in simple, easy-to-digest terms. Defend democracy, defend the climate, strengthen Europe. Now, this kind of strategy comes with risk. Why? Well, it could seem like she's telling us to vote for her because she's not somebody else. In other words, the far right. But this tweet is important. Yeah, she's using a line that features across her social media. We choose courage. This frames her politics in a different light, telling voters that she offers empowerment and action rather than just a response to a threat. Ranke also communicates in a very personal way. In this tweet, she tells us she was born on May the 9th, or Europe Day. There's a video which features photos and footage of her as a child. This creates the idea that Ranke embodies her politics, that the campaign for European solidarity isn't just a policy on a piece of paper, but rather something embedded in her personality. And we see something similar here, Ranke offering her support to what she describes as queers and allies. She's not afraid to put herself front and center, posing for this photo during a Pride march. Let's be clear, she is not the most famous politician in Europe, but she is pretty smart in the way she connects her personality with her politics.
Now, Ranke is part of a group that has more than 70 seats in the European Parliament. That makes it the 4th biggest political bloc.
Well, the Greens are struggling in her home country of Germany. Now let's explore the implications. Our correspondent Peter Oliver joins us from Berlin. Peter, great to see you. Reinke clearly knows how to position herself on social media, and a lot of the European politicians are doing just that. But the Greens have been struggling for support at national level. What does this mean for a campaign?
Well, look, Terry Reinke is clearly a very competent and very serious politician on a European level. She's been in the European Parliament for 10 years now, really, since 2014. She's also been operating as the co-leader of the Green Group for a long time. But really, back in 2014, she probably benefited from the fact that the Greens weren't in power here in Germany. They are now. And the Green Party votes in European elections had previously been seen as something of a, not so much a protest vote, but a way to give a bloody nose to those in power, part of the government of the day. Well, today, the Greens are part of that three-way coalition led by Olaf Scholz, the Social Democrats, along with the Free Democrats. But the Greens make up that triumvirate. It's interesting if you look behind me on the posters, the campaigning posters that they've got running at the moment around the country, not really a mention of Green Party policies. It is saying that we should unite against the right for freedom and to protect the democracy of Europe. That's really the angle they've gone for. One of the reasons for that in Germany is because they've set real ambitious climate goals, but because of part of the compromise of coming into power in a coalition, they've had to not so much walk away from some of those, but they've had to bend some of the ones that they would have been previously more strict upon. Germany has a target of being climate neutral by 2045. I'm not saying they're not going to do it, but it's looking pretty tight at the moment. So that's the situation here in Germany right now. The Green Party will probably lose some votes, with the far right likely to be the ones to pick them up.
Thank you very much. That is our correspondent Peter Oliver in Berlin.
Now, how about some soft diplomacy? China is sending 2 young giant pandas to the United States months after 3 of the bears were returned to Beijing amid heightened tension between the 2 global superpowers.
Washington's Smithsonian National Zoo will host Baoli and Qingbao by the end of the year. China's ambassador to the U.S. described the move as a very good sign for U.S.-China relations. Oh, lovely. Train spotting, once a popular hobby for real enthusiasts in the UK, is making a comeback.
I know, incredible. Online searches for train spotting have soared in the past few years, thanks in large part to social media sensation Francis Bourgeois. Our correspondent Siobhan McCall has the story.
56081 is about to thrash through the platform here.
Francis Bourgeois has been credited with making train spotting cool again. He's got millions of followers on social media and a host of celebrity friends.
I'd like to give you a train whistle.
This group of young train spotters say he's an inspiration for them. One of them is 15-year-old Jasper, who travels around the country to film rare trains.
It's the feeling of when you see a train that you've never seen before, and it's you've seen something that maybe other people haven't, and it's just very exciting to see that train.
He says the hobby can be addictive, and it's even got him into trouble at home.
He should have been packing for a school trip, and so he specifically asked me, can I go and see it? And I said, no, you need to prioritise packing. And then it was early hours of the morning that I noticed a ping on my phone that somebody was sneaking out on the drive, and it was somebody who'd got his bike out at early doors and had disappeared. So yeah, confiscation of bike for a bit.
Jasper's TikTok videos have thousands of followers, and he hopes to turn his passion for the railways into a full-time job. That's something that Oliver Smith has achieved with his YouTube channel Laserjet. It has more than 100,000 subscribers, and he loves the social side of train spotting.
It's going to be mainline certified.
We all meet up, we all have a laugh, we all have a chat, talk about what we've seen, like they see some diesel, I see some steam, and we just hang out. It's a lovely community here, and I can't think of anything better to do.
Yeah, I'm right next to it!
But while Francis Bourgeois is leading a new generation of rail enthusiasts, many of the most popular engines were built in the first half of the 20th century. And few cause as much excitement for train spotters as this. The Flying Scotsman has been described as the world's most famous steam locomotive. It's steeped in history. When it passes on its route between Edinburgh and London, crowds fill station platforms to get a glimpse of this famous engine. And a special exhibition was held at the UK's National Railway Museum to mark its 100th birthday. Manpreet Dada was one of the curators.
It's this living legend. It's in a lot of people's living memory. And, you know, if you bring Flying Scotsman up in conversation, there will almost always be somebody who has a story to share.
One of those is Ian. He's been train spotting since he was a child. And his love of trains and the Flying Scotsman has led him to volunteer at the museum for 13 years.
It's just a wonderful hobby, and you meet so many lovely people. I really enjoy it when we get school children visiting the museum and tell them about Flying Scotsman.
Nestled in between many icons of British rail is also some Chinese history. The KF7 was built in England in 1935.
It was used as very much a workhorse of the Chinese locomotive fleet, and in fact it would have worked from the Canton, Hankow, Nanking and Shanghai railways.
The Chinese government presented this train to the National Railway Museum in 1979 as a gift to the people of Britain. Siobhan McCall, CGTN, York.
And finally, for the 5th time since December, a volcano on Iceland's Reykjanes Peninsula is erupting.
Iceland's meteorological office has reported increased seismic activity in the crater, prompting it to order evacuations from the town of Grindvik and the major tourist attraction, the Blue Lagoon.
All right, let's go through your headlines once more. China's President Xi Jinping holds talks with his Egyptian counterpart in Beijing on the eve of the China-Arab States Cooperation Forum.
Mining giant BHP's pursuit of rival Anglo-American appears to have stalled as a key deadline passes.
And South Africa at the polls with the ruling ANC's 30-year grip on power hanging in the balance.
And that is for Global Business Europe. Thanks for watching.
Coming up next on CGTN is Africa Live. We'll see you again tomorrow, same time, same place. From the team in London, goodbye.
Bye.